core issue here, which is there is a small group of well-funded Wahhabi extremists funded by the Saudi Arabian government, to whom we give money. Listen, you invite me on the show, so what's going to happen, okay? So there's American oil money and American guns to the Saudi Arabian government. Those guns, that money, to Wahhabi extremist Muslims in Saudi Arabia. The only ones who have ever killed us, them. We are not at war with Islam. We are not at war with Muslims. We are not at war with Afghanistan. We are not at war with Iraq, Iran. It's nonsense. So yes, they hold signs, I hate America. Have you seen the signs we hold? The only people that have ever funded a terrorist attack out of that part of the world on us, on your colleagues and your colleagues and your colleagues 10 years ago, 9 years ago, was this Wahhabi sect, and it is an extraordinary failure of our politicians and our media and anybody else who has an opportunity to communicate information to fail to make that distinction, because to fail to make that distinction is to risk a scale of conflict and a scale of disenfranchisement and alienation on this planet that may be convenient for TV ratings and votes, but is an abomination for the human beings who will populate this planet, and it's a lie.
So you have referenced,
the Wahhabis?
To my mind, the most valid point that Bill O'Reilly made, and it is that in the wake of everything that has occurred around the world since September 11th and before September 11th, the cold bombing, the leadership of the Muslim world has remained uniquely silent about what has happened. I mean, you get no encyclical from the Muslim world about
because ultimately think about the dynamic in the Muslim world. The Muslim world, you have different factions that are trying to retain their power relative to other factions within that community, and that includes factions that do not want to see Saudi strength rise, or that don't want to see Iranian strength rise and see Iranian strength as something that can be balanced through other forces. But that's beside the point, which is, in my opinion, which is that whether it's leadership in the Middle East or leadership in America, the failure to make the distinction between the Wahhabi sect that is funded through Saudi money and all other Islam, period. Even, I don't care whether it's Islam who are angry saying I hate Americans, you got a sign. Like I said, go to Ground Zero, go to Florida, I'll show you some signs. Are we going to, since when are we going to go to war over a sign?
Well, I was just going to say, though, to that argument, you could say any group that's trying to protect themselves is always uniquely silent. You say that about the Catholic Church was uniquely silent when it needed to be. My issue with this, we talked around this in the last 3 hours, 2 of the hours I was awake for. But what's interesting is that, to me, it's more about, Dylan, you make that point about ratings, is that it's Bill O'Reilly going on The View to talk about this so they can go back to their respective shows and talk about it. And even us, we talk about it. It's interesting television, but it's almost like this unique sort of ecosphere where we're just feeding each other, and nobody. Oprah's going on The Daily Show with Colbert. I mean, it's just us talking about us talking about us.
But there's a real issue, which is the information distortion and the fear mongering and the amount of money and the amount of power that can be accumulated in this country and other countries through the distortion and exploitation of religious fear and racial fear in exchange for having decent, honest exchange of real information, which is, you know what, most Muslims don't even care about you. And the vast majority of the ones that don't like you from the couch, and there aren't that many of them. And the ones that actually want to kill you, about this many, and it's not because they're Muslim, it's because they've been radicalized, and the religion has been used as a teaching mechanism as sure as Christianity or any other religion could be, but it is not the fact that they are Muslims that makes them terrorists. It is the fact that they are terrorists that makes them terrorists. And that is a massive distinction that I think has been uniformly not made in this country, because I think it strikes to the cognitive dissonance of these huge wars. If we're not at war with Islam, well then would somebody please tell me why it is we're a few $1 trillion up and we've got a few thousand dead soldiers to fight all these wars in all these Middle Eastern countries? Because I thought we were at war with Islam, which is why we've got all these tanks and Predator drones flying everywhere. If we're just at war with a narrow group of well-funded, well-organized extremists out of Saudi Arabia and in that region, well then can somebody please explain, it's tough to explain the policies in that context. If we're at war with Islam, if we're at war with the Muslims, well then my goodness, I mean, there's got to be 10 more countries we've got to go to war with, right? It is an obscene concept, and it's shameful to me that anybody from the president down doesn't make an extraordinarily strong distinction between those two things.